Just done. All right. Welcome, Pastor Hille.
Hey, thank you so much. How are you?
I'm well.
Good to see everybody. Thanks for waking up somewhat early on this Saturday morning. I appreciate greatly. Let's open with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly and gracious God, we thank you for the work that you call us to, the work of your people, the work in our communities to bring the gospel, to teach the gospel, to inspire lives, and to bring people closer to you. Be with us at this time as we turn our hearts and minds to the ministry and outreach of Vacation Bible School. Plant your seeds of inspiration in our lives, that we may reach out and engage with the children of our communities, sharing with them the gospel of your Son, our Savior, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So it's great to be here. I was thinking this morning, I feel really honored that, the good Reverend Kerrigan asked me to do two of these. And then I look at the numbers and I'm like, I must not have done a good enough job the first time. I don't know. No, it's just that time of year. I totally get it. So title of this presentation is Do-It-Yourself Vacation Bible School, or D.I.Y. V.B.S. And just a little bit about me that I think helps kind of shape who I am and an understanding of why I have this high propensity for do-it-yourself events, is that I grew up in this very rural tobacco town in eastern North Carolina. When my family moved in '97, when I was in high school, the community of Fremont had approximately 800 people in it, a little bit less than that. And so I just kind of grew up in this place where you had a lot of free time and a lot of boredom. And, the old phrase is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And Fremont, it was like, even if it is broke, you keep going until it's more broke. And then you keep using it some more, right? Like that was just kind of the reality. And so I've had the honor, or I've had the good fortune to live a lot of places. My family moved. I came to Ohio. I did seminary in Chicago. I graduated in 2010. And my first call was in a really affluent suburb outside of Hartford, Connecticut, called Avon. And it was a great congregation, great group of people, but a really big cultural difference from the town that I grew up in, because it was very much almost that New England kind of Stepford Wives kind of vibe, just in terms of like, it was a very nice, very affluent community, which I was living in a parish house at the time. That was a 2-story in-law apartment, 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. And within 3 months of living there, so many people like turned over their furniture so much that I decorated the entire inside of my house off of trash days. Because in my mind, I'm like, hey, a free sofa is a free sofa, and I'm not spending money because I'm cheap. And so that being said, my first year in Avon, when it came time for a Christmas pageant, we dusted off the one they had always been doing. And when it came time for Vacation Bible School, we went on, I think we bought that year from Concordia Publishing House. We got their hometown Nazareth V.B.S. And then when it was time for a mission trip, we pulled up the mission trips that were happening with different organizations. We signed on and we just kind of did everything by the numbers, which was a great first year as a first call pastor. But then the second year rolled around, and I don't know, it's probably because I have a little bit of an ego, and secondly, because I think I can do everything better myself. But that second year, when it came time for the Christmas pageant, I go, well, let me just write that myself. And so then when it came time for Vacation Bible School, I had the same thought, because I thought back to the 2011, the hometown Nazareth, and how much we paid for that curriculum, and what we actually got from that curriculum. And I thought to myself, for that amount of money, I can write that myself, save that money, and use that money on the actual programming, on the decorations, and all that sort of thing. And so ever since 2012, I've written every Vacation Bible School from the ground up that the churches I have served has operated, which again is A, a lot of fun, and B, I think a lot more contextually reflective of the people, the community, and the ministries that are happening there. And if you guys were part of the do-it-yourself Christmas pageant that I did a few months ago, a lot of my starting parameters are the same, right? Like, because that's my general creative process. You look around your congregation You look around your context, your community. You identify what are the parameters you have. How many kids, what is your physical space, what's your average number of volunteers, all this sort of thing. You identify then what are your positive assets. What volunteers do you have that can bring things to the table? What are the things they're bringing? What does your physical space kind of allow to have happen in your environment? And also, who are your community partners? What are the things in your church that are teaching tools? All this sort of thing. And then the third part of that is you look at your story, whether it's the history of your church, the history of how liturgy is done in your church, the community relations. And this can be anything from, I served a church called St. Matthew. And, us in the Lutheran church, we love sticking Saint whatnot on the front end of our church names, right? So, just again, like a really cool VBS idea would be if you are at a St. Matthew or a St. John, call it, St. John's V.B.S. and build the whole thing around stories out of John's gospel, right? So that again, there's this community tie-in in a really simple way, and I'm a little bit of a uptight person when it comes to grammar and whatnot. And I always kind of like shudder when I go by a church and it's like St. Matthew's Lutheran Church with the apostrophe S, because I'm like, does Matthew own the deed? Is that how that works? Or is it St. Matthew Lutheran Church? But to say like St. John's Vacation Bible School, like that would be really clever, right? You know what I mean? And you can get to roll that out in a little bit. And so again, in all of my do-it-yourself kind of experiences, I start with this idea, whether we're talking vacation Bible schools or Christmas pageants or mission trips, what are the parameters you have? What are the assets you have? And what is your community story? Or in a VBS case, what is the story that you're trying to tell? And if you lay out those three things, the pieces kind of arrange themselves, and it makes the rest of the work a lot easier. I was doing a podcast the other day with a friend, and we were talking about creativity, especially during COVID time, and what inspires us as people. And I made the comment that for me, there is nothing more terrifying than an open Word document and a blinking cursor and no prompt and no restrictions. Like that is the most terrifying. It's one of the reasons that I love the Revised Common Lectionary, right? Sometimes it's a little bit of an albatross, but even when even on those hard Sundays, I enjoy being forced in that box, because that box kind of brings out the creativity. If I know what my parameters are, I get to build up out of that. So that's my starting point. That'll always kind of be just the starting point for my creative process. But to take a step back, an essential question is, what do we need to have a vacation Bible school? Like, what is absolutely imperative? And I think that at the end of the day, there's two answers to that question. One answer is you need kids, right? You got to have people in the room. Fair. And the other thing that you need is a curriculum. And my argument is that it is a lot easier, and often it is a lot easier to build the curriculum than it is to get kids in the room, right? That being said, if you have an awesome curriculum, hopefully you'll get, the curriculum will attract kids. And, if you have a core group at any church, and if Monday is a great day, you'll have more kids on Tuesday. I've seen that every year I've done VBSs, you know what I mean? But putting together the curriculum is, I think, the easiest part of this. And the easiest way to get a curriculum is to buy VBS in a box. And I think we've all seen them. Concordia puts them out. Augsburg Fortress puts them out. Cokesbury puts them out. Group Publishing puts them out. They're typically between $130 to $300. You get a big box in the mail and you open it up, and it's everything you need, which is, there's always an asterisk. Whenever you buy anything, it's like everything you need, there's always that asterisk. But the thing that I find very odd about those VBS in a box kind of curriculums, And maybe it's because I'm an old curmudgeon at heart and I base my entire ministry style on pastors in the 1950s. I really want my VBS to be centered around Jesus, and specifically Jesus in the context of biblical stories and the New Testament, or biblical stories of the Old Testament. I think that the B of Vacation Bible School stands for Bible. Therefore, that is a really good idea to tie them in. And so when I see curriculums that are Jesus Explores Manhattan, I think to myself, that seems odd, or the Vacation Bible School that is Talking Airplanes, or the Vacation Bible School that is Exploring God, Space with God, or just whatever the case may be. I find these things to be really, really, really weird. Jesus on safari. I remember I saw that, and the premise was you're in a Jeep with Jesus and you're driving around and looking at giraffes and different animals. Which again, I just think to myself, like, it's been a long time since I've read the Minor Prophets and those lesser letters in the back of the New Testament, but I don't think 2 John has anything about Jesus in a Jeep Cherokee chasing after a rhino. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but that just kind of weirds me out. And I think that as colleagues in ministry, our job, especially with children of that age, is to teach the stories of Scripture and to teach these passages from the Bible. There was an Alban Institute article about 12 years ago now that said, if you are having a children's sermon or a children's time in the middle of worship, the best thing that you can do at that time is bring the kids forward and reread the gospel that they either just heard or are about to hear, because repetition breeds familiarity. And if you try to, break down the holy paradoxical mystery of the Trinity to say God is like H2O, liquid, solid, or gas, and you send them back to the pew and their parent goes, "What did you just learn in the children's sermon?" The response is going to be, "God is an ice cube." Right? Because it's that tactile understanding, we as adults don't understand the mystery of the Trinity, right? So that's a lot to project on kids who are, of that age. So my thing is let's jump into Scripture. Let's jump into those stories. Let's explore the deep well that we have, and breed the familiarity of those texts. And that's why in 2011 we did Hometown Nazareth, because it was the only Vacation Bible School in a box I could find that was focused on Jesus in a biblical setting. And again, I feel like that's a low bar on my end for looking for VBSs to be like, I need Jesus in the Bible. And that was it. And again, the folks at Concordia, I think, do really good stuff. So I was behind that too. So, but that brings the other question. So you spend $300, you get VBS in a box. What do you get? You typically get the 5 days worth of Bible lessons and a way to teach them. You get a lot of recommendations for what crafts could be, but you don't get the crafts themselves, and you don't get the hard line, on this day you do that. You get a few suggestions for games. You get a lot of PR materials, brochures, signs, a lot of branded materials, a lot of logo materials to get people excited. And often you'll get a teaser of each of the crafts that then you get to buy as an add-on per kid, right? And then they also, and this is just great marketing, you get a brochure that lets you know you can also buy bracelets and hats and T-shirts and game leader things and individual packets for Sunday or for Bible time breakout and all this kind of stuff, which if you're paying $5.99 per craft and you have, 30 kids and you've already paid $300 for the box, suddenly these costs are all going to add up. Your T-shirts are going to be 10 to 12 a pop unless you're buying over 100. And so suddenly $130 to $300 VBS in a box turns into a $1,500 to $3,000 project based on how many kids you have. And there's a lot of truth in the idea of if a VBS or if any program is written so broadly that it's written for everybody, then it's really not written for anybody in particular, right? And you lose that contextual touchstone of your congregation, which, I mean, when we do them in our churches, that will imbue a certain degree of that. I just tend to think that there are better ways to raise up the people in our communities, to engage with our communities, and to get our own creative juices flowing. And I think that once those creative juices get flowing, people get really inspired. And I think inspired people inspire other people. Like that is a core belief I have, whether we're talking about youth ministry or Bible studies or worship on a Sunday morning. If people are getting fed and getting inspired, inspired people inspire other people. And so the year was 2011. We get Hometown Nazareth. We pull it out of the box, yada, yada, yada. And we do the whole thing. And at the end of VBS, I'm sitting down with my team and I'm asking them for their pros and cons about what went well and what went bad and what was the best resources. And it dawned on me, and I had this idea in the planning stages, that the most important thing in that VBS in a box boils down to one piece of paper that I call the lead sheet. And this is in the materials that the good Reverend Kerrigan sent out to everybody. It is a 5x5 grid, and across the top I just wrote title, theme, because, for example, in 2011 it said Hometown Nazareth, where Jesus is a kid. We got the 5 days of the week across the top, Monday through Friday, and then coming down the side are our 5 activity areas. We got Bible, crafts, music, game, and snacks. And so when you buy a VBS in a box, it always comes with a sheet like this, and this breaks down the entire week at a glance, which for the volunteers, for the area directors, for the parents, this is what your kids are going to learn. This is what we're going to teach. This is how we're going to build our entire VBS. And so again, this is me growing up in a poor town and being really cheap. I don't need to pay $300 for a piece of paper. I'm not going to steal the idea. I'm going to liberate the idea, and I'm going to use it myself, right? Like, this is how this, for me, this is how it rolls. And this piece of paper is the backbone for every VBS. So starting in 2012, I started writing my own Vacation Bible School curriculums. And so I would print out a lead sheet that was blank, just like this one. And I would kick around the can for a little bit and think about ideas that I thought would be good general themes. And once I picked the general theme, then my biggest job was to pick the 5 Bible stories that would support that theme. Write them down on my, write them across the top on my Bible line. And then I would invite my volunteers and say, here's my theme, here are 5 Bible stories. What can you do about X or Y or Z? And at that point in time, I kind of let go of the reins, because my volunteers know their areas of expertise far, far, far better than I do. And so I'm going to let those horses run, because, again, that's their skill set. And so, my first year of writing it, I'm a little audacious sometimes. And my first year, 2012, the theme was Emmanuel, God is with us. And the idea was that we had 5 days of Vacation Bible School, Monday through Friday. And then on Friday night, we always had a sending event where the kids would sing the songs that they learned for all their friends and parents, and we'd have an ice cream social. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I have like a different liturgical season every day? So Monday is Advent, Tuesday is Christmas, or Advent, Christmas, Wednesday is Epiphany, Thursday is Lent, Friday is Easter, and then Friday night will be Pentecost, and we'll send all the kids out. And so I talked to my volunteers into this, everybody was seeming to get really excited. And I talked to my decorating committee, and I say decorating committee, I talked to the one lady who was doing all my decorations. And I said, I have this vision that we're going to go down to like Marshall's and buy big pieces of fabric. And I want like blue fabric, white fabric, green fabric, purple fabric, and red fabric. And every day I want to change all the fabrics. So Advent, everything is blue. Christmas, everything is white. Epiphany, everything is green. So we're teaching the liturgical season to these kids in lessons, in crafts, in all of these different things. And I got everybody to go in on my idea. And then I realized that asking volunteers to show up early to prep, to teach their areas, and then to stay late to redecorate the church every single night was a really big ask. And I still remain thankful to all those volunteers. But I didn't realize how much of an extra ask of people's time that was going to be. And so again, like you live and you learn and you move forward. Year after that, I did All God's Creatures, which I was standing at Home Depot and I saw this lattice and thought it was really cheap. And so I bought it and I was trying to figure out what to do with this lattice. I was like, oh, well, I could like just set this up and make like a fenced in area. I was like, I should do a vacation Bible school about animals. And that was where that started, right? And so we did the donkey from Palm Sunday. We did the cattle in the stable with the birth of Jesus. We did the dove at Jesus's baptism. And like the whole VBS was based around these ideas of biblical animals and the fact that we are all God's creatures. Look at this great diversity, and God has a relationship and a use and a function for each and every one of us, no matter how different we are. So that's two examples of just ones that like jumped right out of like I picked the Bible theme first and then kind of like grew it out of there. But the weird or the funny thing about inspiration, I think, is as long as you find people who are inspired or inspiring, you can kind of retrofit an idea into a really good VBS. And that's quintessential if your volunteers are inspired by it. There is a great brewery in Eastern Massachusetts called Treehouse Brewing. And a friend of mine who was a member at my previous church, we would go to Treehouse about once a month and stand in a very long line to buy beer that was far too expensive, but very, very good. And one day we were in line and my buddy Josh said, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we wrote Vacation Bible School this year based on Treehouse Brewing? And again, we were in line for an hour, so we had time to kill. So I pull out my phone and I start making notes and I'm like, all right, well, what are we going to call it? And Josh starts laughing and he goes, Treehouse of God's Love. And I'm like, perfect. So we need 5 Bible stories that involves people in trees or things made out of wood, right? Joseph's a carpenter. Zacchaeus is in the tree, the wood of the manger, the wood of the cross, Noah's Ark. Cool. Here are our 5 wood stories. And then within 40 minutes, we had put together this VBS idea. So what we did was we had 4 kids of groups. We planned for 4 kids of groups, and their group names and group colors were based off of names and labels of beer brewed at Treehouse. Like if you had ever been to that brewery and you came to our VBS that year, you would have just stood there scratching your head going, this looks so familiar and I can't put my finger on it. And I was like, that's kind of the point, right? So when we're looking for inspiration, it can really come from anywhere. But for me, it's you get inspired, you find that kernel, and then as it's simmering and getting ready to pop, like you do that in the frying pan of scripture, right? You do that in the frying pan of your parameters and your assets and your community story and what you're trying to teach. But then you can get anywhere from anywhere as we kind of approach that idea. Because again, I think that talking about the treehouse of God's love, hitting all these biblical stories, has a much wider reality than Jesus explores Manhattan. Which again, I love Manhattan. I would get a lot out of that story. But if I'm trying to teach kids in Columbus the difference between Jesus being in the village and the Upper East Side, I'm going to spend 20% of that day explaining the difference between the village and the Upper East Side, right? And when you do that, then you're really missing the other point of it. Along that line, in 2016, I put together a VBS called Ocean of God's Love. And the hard part with this, or the big challenge was, that year, I led a mission trip of 14 high school students to Romania for 13 days to lead a summer vacation Bible school for the Roma population. And so when I sat down to write that vacation Bible school with the high school kids, every lesson, every craft, every game that we put together, the question was, how are we going to teach this in America, and how are we going to teach this in Romania? How are we going to teach this with 5-year-olds who speak English, who it's going to be really easy? And how do we teach the same lesson to 5-year-olds with translators when we know that that's going to be a really different reality? And the good news is that when your texts are all based in scripture, then you know that your starting point is the same. We did Ocean of God's Love. So obviously we did, Jesus walking on water. We did the woman at the well. We did the baptism of Jesus. We did all these great water texts. And so it didn't matter which country we were in. We could start by saying, the baptism of Jesus, and everyone would say yes. Or, you can pick up the Bible and you go straight from there. I led a mission trip to Romania about 10 years ago now. And I was part of an organization, and I kind of came in late to it. And their model was it was a week-long VBS in North Romania. And the first night, we had all the kids watch The Incredibles, the Disney Pixar movie, which was fine. But their curriculum for their VBS was using The Incredibles to talk about different patriarchs and matriarchs of the Old Testament, which is interesting, right? Like Mr. Incredible is Abraham, Miss Incredible is Ruth, like this sort of thing. But I just remember the whole week thinking how counterintuitive it is to show kids a movie, teach them a movie, like get them really into the movie. And then at the end of it, be like, all right, and this is also like Abraham. Because it was 80% movie, 20% biblical text. And I'm sure those kids really understand The Incredibles, but I don't know how much of that connection was made, right? So to make sure that everything is rooted textually in the stories of Scripture, I think that is the key thing as we're looking forward and as we're moving ahead. So again, whenever it's time to write a VBS, I print out a blank lead sheet. I think about my theme. I kick around a couple ideas. I pick the theme. I try to figure out my 5 Bible stories that are going to support that. And once I have my theme and once I have my 5 Bible stories, the next big thing is to invite volunteers who are going to help me run Vacation Bible School, because Lord knows, like, none of us can do any of this alone, right? It's the old adage of it takes a village. And I think that the first thing I always remind myself and other colleagues who have helped kind of develop VBS is once you get a volunteer on board, especially someone who is willing and excited to be an area director, as quickly as you can, hand over the reins and trust them and support them. And as a mentor of mine once told me, 85% of our job is being cheerleaders for the ministries that other people are doing in our congregations. So if you get a great craft volunteer and they're like, hey, I got these 5 ideas, like I saw your stories, these are my 5 craft ideas. Absolutely, that's awesome. Again, excited people excite other people. So if they're excited and I'm excited, that's going to be a really positive echo chamber. And I realize that in the modern world, we have a lot of negative echo chambers in the world. So like, let's use that psychological principle to our benefit here, right? The second thing I recommend people is if you have high school kids who are strong leaders or strong volunteers or just good with kids, don't shy away from high school kids not only being group leaders, leading around the younger kids, but high school leaders can be area directors as well. I've had high school kids run games for me. I've had high school kids teach music, to do the music section. I've had now I think about it, I've had high school kids be area directors for all 5 areas of VBS across my 9 or 10 years of doing this. Because again, if they're excited about it, then they're going to take it seriously. And if they're taking it seriously and doing a good job, A, they're doing a good job. B, the kids who are at VBS will love the fact that they get to hang out with a high school kid. And it's encouraging that connection of that high school student to those kids, to their parents, and to the ministry of the congregation. It really is a win-win-win. The other idea is to look outside of your congregation to other people who may be good volunteers, people who you know from different sections of life. And this is a really almost kind of covert, sneaky way of evangelism, right? Like if you know you have a friend who has a skill set, you make a pitch about VBS, kind of talk about it. If you see there's an interest, invite them in. I've had a lot of success with this, meeting like friends of friends, or there's the family who used to be active and then their kid went to college and then they're less active, but they show up for Christmas or Easter. And then I meet them and go, oh, well, what are you doing? And they go, well, I'm in college and, I'm elementary ed. And I'm like, hey, if you're around for summer break, we would love to have you as part of VBS. I would love you to help me plan this. And again, it's the invitation, right? And for me, like a key part of that invitation is, I'm not saying, hey, I got a box, I need you to do this. I'm saying like, here's my big idea. What gets you excited? Like, let's do that and let me support your excitement. And this literally happened yesterday. We have a really good community partner here in the Whitehall community that's a brewery who we do a lot of work with. I was talking to one of the regulars at the brewery yesterday, and I was talking to him about this presentation and VBS and how we build it and stuff like that. And I told him this idea of, you get your theme and you get your 5 Bible stories, your 5 songs, your 5 crafts, your yada, yada, yada. And then you invite people and say, hey, like, what do you want to do? And my buddy Steve, he goes, I was a music major back in the 90s. And I was like, I did know that. And he goes, would you let me come and work at your vacation Bible school? And I kind of look at him and he's like, if you're telling me I just get to pick 5 Bible songs and like hang out with kids and play my guitar and sing all week, he goes, if you would let me do that, I would love to do that. I got like, this is literally a conversation I had yesterday at a bar. And it's a guy who I've known. And so I have that friendship, I have that trust. And so, yeah, like looking outside of, it almost feels weird in the modern world to look outside the walls of our sanctuary, because I feel like so few of us have been in sanctuaries so recently, but to widen our paradigm and say, like, who are the people I'm connecting with? How might they be excited? And then like, let me make that invitation, And every year I've ever had non-members on board as VBS area directors or volunteers. I have a few people in the congregation who are like, oh, can we trust them? Do we have to run a background check? And my response is, I've known so-and-so for 2 years. Like, if you trust me, trust the people I'm bringing in, right? Like, I'm not advocating for standing on the street corner and saying free vacation Bible school positions, right? I'm saying, like, know the people who you know and invite them into the world and that sort of thing. And again, just to underline it a second time, the idea of especially those area directors, once they're in the driver's seat, like, let go of those reins and trust them, because like, at least in my world, my area directors always know their stuff way better than I do, just way better than I do. I was thinking about cool things that I've seen in the past, and I mentioned this in the YouTube video. It was during the Emmanuel God is with us VBS that my snacks director had this idea of resurrection rolls, that she bought one of those rolls of cinnamon bun dough that you pop the thing and you make it. And she had the kids roll that out. And then she had the kids take a full-sized marshmallow and, like, dip it in, it was like butter or frosting or whatever the case may be, like you were anointing a body. And then she had them sprinkle a little cinnamon on it, like, the spices, thinking anointing at Bethany kind of thing, right? Wrap up the marshmallow in the cinnamon bun dough, like the body in the tomb, stuck it in the oven, pulled it out a minute later, marshmallow had melted, had disappeared, resurrection in a dessert. I would have never thought of that in a million years. And that was 8 years ago. And it's still one of my favorite examples to give. Another thing she did was on Thursday, if you look at a lot of big box curriculums, and I think I know why I do this, but if you look at a lot of big box curriculums, Thursday is always the sad day. Like Hometown Nazareth, Thursday was the crucifixion day, right? Jesus in the air with the airplanes, Thursday was what to do when you hit turbulence day. So for whatever reason, Thursday is always like the weird, sad day. And so you can come back for the resurrection of Friday, which is my assumption. But it was Hometown Nazareth. We did the, Emmanuel, God is with us. It was Lent. And so our big Lent thing was the betrayal of Jesus. And so my snacks director read the story of Caiaphas losing his ear in the garden when they tried to arrest Jesus. So she found heart-shaped cookies, broke them in half so it kind of looked like an ear, and then used red icing to make it look like a severed ear, which is A, traumatic, but B, hilarious and entirely on point. I can only imagine those kids got home and their parent or whomever was in the van picking them up and goes, "How is Vacation Bible School?" I'm like, "We ate an ear for snacks." But they're not going to forget it, right? Like that's the thing. That's why I love left field ideas. I once heard a game designer talking about this game that he worked in, and he said the one thing that I've learned in game design is that if you take a lot of chances, no matter how crazy or stupid they are, people will remember you taking chances, especially if they impact them a good way. If you bore people, they'll just quit showing up. And so I've always, ever since I heard that, that's a driving force of mine, which is, all right, come to Vacation Bible School. It's going to be all over the place. You're going to be surprised, but you're not going to be bored. And if we get kids excited, then excited people excite other people. Just a few other ideas about like trusting your area directors. When we ran Ocean of God's Love in Romania, doing a VBS is one thing when it's a 2-hour program. Our Romanian VBS, it was a 5-day sleepaway camp. So we were with these kids sun up to sundown for 5 days, which again, turning a 4-hour program into a 10-hour program, that's a totally different beast. And so my games director was a great high school kid named Kevin. And Kevin had written out, Kevin's a guy who over prepares, and he had about an hour's worth of games all 5 days. And game time was like 35 minutes because it was a broken out schedule. Well, it just so happened that anytime any of the evening programs kind of fell through, people couldn't make it in, or there were problems with summer camp, which for any of us who have been to summer camp, we know things always fall out of the bottom, at the most inopportune time. The Romanian director would stop, look around the room and say, "And now Kevin is going to take you out to play more games." So there were probably 3 nights where Kevin needed an extra 2 hours of games to pull out of nowhere. And that kid never complained once. Those kids were never bored. And he was exhausted at the end of every day. But I have no idea how he did that. We were talking about it, and he goes, "Pastor, I'm a lifelong Boy Scout. I volunteer with the Cub Scouts." He goes, "I'm a soccer coach. I hang out with kids doing soccer stuff." He goes, "I'm a swim coach." I just went into the memory of all these different games and was able to adapt them and use them. And I go, I appreciate that, because if it was up to me, the game would be, I'm going to tie you in a group and please be quiet, right? Because that's not my skill set. That is not my skill set at all, at all. And then my dear friend Christine, who was our arts and crafts director at my first church for a few years, said to me my first year doing VBS that always have one day of your Vacation Bible School where you take a picture of every single kid, and make sure that one of your 5 craft days or one of your 4 craft days is decorating a picture frame that has the year and the theme of the VBS on it, whatever it is. Because years after VBS, every parent will hold on to a picture of their kid that they know what year it was. And those are the priceless artifacts that come out of Vacation Bible School. Plus, on a planning level, then you only have to think of 4 crafts and not 5, because you know one of them is going to be a picture frame. And I reached out to Christine when I was putting this presentation together, and I was reminded talking to her that, like, I've learned more and continue to learn more about youth ministry from my Vacation Bible School volunteers than from any other source in my life. I've learned more about youth ministry from the people who helped me plan VBS than I did at seminary or any other book I've read or any conference I've ever been to. And so I very selfishly go into Vacation Bible School excited because I know at the end of every year, I'm going to learn so much from so many people whose qualifications exceed mine in so many levels. Because very much like a 90-year-old man, I enjoy black coffee, reading the newspaper, and being by myself. Like, that is a perfect day, right? So you put me in a room with like 40 kids who are running around and screaming, I can fake it to a point. But again, not my skill set. Crowd control, not my skill set, just not what. And again, there are people who do that a lot better than me that I learn from every year that I'm always thrilled to work with and you get to know them better. You know, you go through VBS with a bunch of volunteers and suddenly you all have war stories. And you know, the trauma, it binds us all together. Like in a really good way, I just read a book called Keep Running, written by the Columbus poet Maggie Smith. And if you're just looking for a book to read, I can't recommend it enough. It's called Keep Moving. Maggie Smith, it's reflections on trauma, loss, and creativity. And one of the things that Maggie writes about in one of the essays in that book is we often talk about post-traumatic stress, but she brings up the idea of post-traumatic creativity. Like in the event of a really hard time, the fact that sometimes we force ourselves to be creative or we think about things in a new way coming out of those experiences. And I can't think of a better phrase to describe my post-VBS volunteer meeting than post-traumatic creativity. Because we look back at the week that just happened and we're like, these things went really, really, really well. These things made us all want to stick our head in the oven. And this is the path we're going to take to, you know, highlight the highlights and to kind of avoid the things that were bigger headaches. I'm going to stop just for a second. I feel like I'm talking an awful lot. And this is the perilous nature about a gregarious person on Zoom, right? Like, because I just see heads and I appreciate all the nonverbals. But do you guys have questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, short haikus?
Carolyn. There you go.
I'm really fascinated by this because I'm at Christ Lutheran in Heath. And for the last, I think at least 3 years, we have used a program where the kids from Lomo camp come and do our VBS, so to speak. But since last summer, I have heard some comments from parents that, golly, you know, so-and-so thought it was just the same old as the year before. And I keep thinking, we pay a hefty fee for it. It's about $1,500 or so. And it's nice to support the camps. I'm not saying it's not. But when I saw your session advertised, I thought, oh my gosh. I'm a retired teacher and I used to direct Cub Scout day camp in Miami Valley and did all kinds of things. And I think, golly, it wouldn't be that hard to put together a curriculum and make it really awesome. I love the width and the breadth of what you're talking about, and plus the organizational tips. That's what's tough. Being organized and making everything kind of fit, you know, because I remember when I first moved up here, first started going to Christ Lutheran, wow, our VBS, it was so exciting and fun, and the kids would sing like crazy, and all of the young mothers were involved. And now it seems to me we're less involved, although it's a little difficult to tell at this time since we don't go to church. But anyway, thank you. I think this is exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you're 100% right? So here at Faith, they have a long history of having LOMO happen as well, right?
Oh, okay.
And I think that supporting our ELCA camps, like I was a camp kid in North Carolina growing up, Luther Ridge out in Arden, North Carolina. I think that those are great experiences, and I think any way that we could support them, and obviously camp counselors bring a different kind of creative energy, and those are all the pros. But one of the cons of that is if another group comes in and runs your whole VBS, then there's a lot less skin in the game on the congregational level. Right. And again, that's not a negative, but like it's a pro and a con, you know what I mean? Because I was talking about this idea last summer when I came to Faith about like, oh, we could write our own VBS, because they were saying the same thing. LOMO kids are great, kind of hefty price tag. And again, I'm like, I don't need to spend money on anything. We can do it ourselves. And I felt like the conversation here, they felt weird because they didn't realize how many volunteers they would need. Yeah. Because they haven't needed that many volunteers in a long time. But if you have those volunteers, and again, like your volunteers are excited, and especially like talking about like young mothers and young families and like families that have kids, if you get, you know, one young parent to get really excited about their area, you can bet dollars to donuts that they're going to tell their friends, hey, my kid's doing this and I'm leading it. And suddenly like they're going to invite more people. Right. Excited people excite people, you know? Yeah. No, it's really good. And again, like I got a few more notes, but Carolyn, anything I can do to give you like more specific notes? I hopefully I'll get to that in our second hour, because part of the packet that was sent out was last week I put together an entire vacation Bible school. And so we're just going to kind of walk over the ideas and the thoughts to that. And so feel free to ask me any of those like nitty gritty, like planning questions, because those questions are a lot easier to answer than the more amorphous ones, right? Because if you're like, well, how do you do X? I'm like, all right, well, like in my context, this is how I break it down. So I'm more than happy, and thank you for your comments.
You know, and what you just said, oh, I'm sorry, Katie, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
You. What you just said was excitement breeds excitement. Yep. And so I have noticed these last 2 or 3 years that the attitude has become from our own moms, well, they're going to do it. I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
And the only program that our own people did, and they were preschool. We did the whole preschool thing. It was just phenomenal because, well, they happen to be retired teachers too, but very creative, very scripture oriented, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you don't involve them, what happens to those people?
Yeah, then they drift away. Yeah, if you don't have skin in the game.
Yeah, you tend to get back what you invest as a community, right? The community gets back what it invests, and it probably seems like the deal of the century to buy your way out of investing. I mean, that's kind of what happens with LOMO. And as a busy mother, I totally understand buying your way out of being invested, but there is a cost to that. I also think that's important in lifting up the community building aspect of doing VBS yourself. Even if you do buy it out of do it out of a box, there's because you have all of these people who are involved in helping to fine tune it or tailor it to your context, and lead it. That means there's just a whole lot more people who are involved, and particularly considering the way in which for such a long time we've been siloing our congregations into different silos, particularly around age. Having someone else come in and do your VBS, which in so many ways can be a boon to congregations who can't pull that off, do it themselves. But it does still kind of mean all the kids are siloed and none of the adults are involved other than to do sort of drudgery stuff, kitchen stuff, right? And it's a little harder. Some people are excited by kitchen stuff, but it's hard to get really excited about it. And there's nothing different about it. But a community that does its own Bible study, I mean, there's a community building aspect to that just kind of rejuvenates and brings new life back into a congregation. And they have a history, and they take with them into the coming year a kind of a liturgy that grows out of the VBS. That is, they know songs. They all know the songs, which can be lifted up through the coming year. They all have Bible studies, stories, which can be referred to through the coming year. And that also has a community building aspect. So there's just so much wealth and richness that can come to a community that's willing to invest itself in this way. They will benefit in ways they never even dreamed was possible, but pastors ought to get it.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, to even take that step further, because I've done this in the past where like I'll write intentional connections between the Vacation Bible School and the Christmas pageant.
Yes.
Because you have kids who show up for both, right? And so you're giving the kids that connectivity, that this is all connected, as opposed to, okay, well, this is by itself and this is by itself. Plus, like, I don't know, I watch a lot of TV. A lot of people watch a lot of TV, and there's nothing better than you're watching a show and you see those Easter eggs that call back to one another.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we look for that. And parents, if you have the parent who's involved with VBS and then they come to the pageant and the same joke comes up or the same prop comes up, again, you're teaching not only the kids, but you're teaching the parents there.
Yes.
And it's, without even batting an eye, it's intergenerational without even trying to be, right? Like,
yes. And the kids feel more a part of the community than they often do the rest of the time. We don't realize how often kids feel kind of excluded in the ways in which we treat them in the church if we're not careful. But when they start singing a VBS song and grown-ups around them, unrelated to them, start singing it too, instant connection, right? This is, instantly part of the community. And so the more you can, pull that back into your continuing life forward, the more sense of connection you build for your kids. And isn't that what we want for them? We want them to feel a part of the community. So
I served one church and I watched them in the course of a year build a children's choir off the back of the Vacation Bible School.
Really?
Yes.
Kids, and they taught them all these songs and the kids loved them. And, all the parents were like, knew one another. It was a small town in Illinois. And, the pastor kind of saw that and like swooped in and was like, hey, do you want to keep letting your kids hang out? And like, we could do a kids choir. All your kids are friends and they like doing this. And they built a children's choir like off the back of that.
Yeah.
And the kids felt connected, which helped connect the parents. The number one rule of youth ministry is love me, love my kid, right? Like that's the deal. And the parents saw the positive benefit of the kids. The kids wanted to go because it wasn't going to church in that negative way. It was, I get to go hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. And again, attitudes are contagious. And sometimes that's a really negative thing. And sometimes that's really positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that year, well, the Lomo group does basically elementary school. So they didn't do preschool like I mentioned previously.
Right.
And they didn't do grades 7, 8, 9 and up. So that year, another retired teacher and I took the teenagers. I tell you, that was so much fun. And we worked up, do you know the song, God is on the move, on the move, on the move? Okay, we worked that into the end of our week. We practiced and then they sang it on Friday night. And then guess what? Just what you said, Pastor, is that later in the year, those kids wrote a pageant, so to speak, and it was for Christmas. It was different than the normal ones, but they worked that song in. So the whole congregation is singing this song, and they got standing ovation, and it was so exciting. And even though now it's 2 or 3 years later, I can walk up to one of those kids and I can go, God is on the move, and we all know that song. And such good points that you're making about creating that continuity that just keeps going.
Deacon Diane.
Yeah, just to build on that too, in my last congregation, all the years I was there, we did collaborative VBS with the other ELCA congregations in the town. And then for the last 4 years that I was there, it was multi-denominational because this Methodist church up the hill saw our banner on our porch at our church, and they had the same banner and realized we're doing the same curriculum, and they were before us, so they were sharing their leftovers with us. The one it just it grew like, well, if we're going to do the same curriculum, why don't and you have big air conditioned space. And they needed more volunteers. And so we were able to just combine all that into one great community. So we had kids and we had teams of, and it talked about, you mentioned releasing your area directors. And that's totally what we did. So one of our Lutheran congregations always did preschool craft. So here's your theme, here's our, organizational meeting. We need a supply list in a month, go for it, right? And so we released all those teams, the snack team, the preschool craft, the science team, whatever it was. They're just, released, give us your plan and your supply list, and we'll figure out the budget from there and how we can work it in, right? And then the connection with the music. That's been my thing. I'm a musical person in my young life, but not in my old life. So I can't play the guitar and lead music or anything. So I need people, right? But to make those connections. So the V.B.S songs, we did them all through Sunday school in our openings, all through. And we would keep, but there was a good song from 4 years ago. So now new kids are learning it and older kids are remembering it again. And it's so that VBS, no matter what you do, isn't standing alone for this one special week in the summer that, has no connection to the rest of the year or years. So, thank you. I think I'm pretty much stuck with a box because they didn't do their box last year because of COVID.
Oh, yes.
And so the box is on my desk when I walked in this morning because we have our planning meeting in 2 weeks. So I think I'm stuck with the box. But I did check Thursday's lesson. It is not a sad lesson in this curriculum. It is just water. So
hey, awesome.
But I know the pattern you're talking of. So
Good for them.
This is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well.
I have to tell you that I almost did a spit take when you said that. The fact that Thursday is always
a sad day. Yeah.
It really truly is. We have a slightly different situation. First of all, we have to have an evening program. because it's very hard to get folks during the day. I wish that we could do an all-day program. Where our congregation is, it certainly could be used. So we do an evening program, and it's, to be honest with you, the biggest pool is feeding people. There's a lot of hunger in our area. And, you know, every couple years, the pendulum kind of shifts because for many years, we would have tons and tons of neighborhood kids. And then it would kind of dwindle down. Then all of a sudden there were, I mean, it's a lot of transients in the neighborhood. And then all of a sudden we couldn't even get 5 kids from the neighborhood. So we kind of reframed it and made it more of a family thing. And we traveled, I mean, we're very small. So I would say on any given night, we would have 30 people. But, you know, we would all just be this giant group going from activity to activity. Nice. You know, just as a family group. And so, yeah, we're very intergenerational right now. And we've also learned in the past that we have back when we had a lot of kids, we had a really hard time putting them into age groups, because a lot of the kids that came did not want to be separated from their siblings. And a lot of older siblings actually were tasked with having to keep their younger siblings with them. So I don't know, I guess I'm really enjoying some of the ideas that you're throwing out here. And I can't wait. I can't wait to get back into the swing here this summer, hopefully.
So as you say that, a few things come to mind. My previous call, we did nighttime VBS because in the community that we were in, daytime was a no-go. Like morning was a no-go, noon was a no-go. So I definitely know that reality really well. And one of the issues that we were running into was that the time that we wanted VBS to happen was right around dinner time, right? Which is different than like hunger being an issue in that community, which you said is a thing on your end. But the reason I bring this up is my snack team decided that in order to get more kids there and to take the issue of how do I feed my kid and get my kid to VBS, my snack team actually prepared a full meal. And the first 45 minutes of VBS was literally a community meal.
Yeah.
And then we went from that into the VBS curriculum, which kind of ran off of, you know, my little weird 5-box method. And then they also had a take-home snack at the end of the night.
Yes, we do a lot of sending kids home with food. But yes, we would use that time. And frankly, our program would only, some years we try to push it to 3 hours. Most years it's 2.5 in the evenings. And I'll tell you at least an hour of it's eating, just because, you know, we say, okay, we're going to start 6 and then kids don't get there till 6:30. And, you know, but what we do make sure to have on the tables, we have, sometimes it's just like cards for the adults and teenagers to kind of have conversation starters about the theme or the scripture that we're doing that night. And sometimes there'll be even objects, found objects that are tied to the theme where, you know, that kind of will stir conversation. So we try to capitalize on the fact that, you know, we're going to be sitting here and we're going to be eating, because frankly, that's our ministry right there. But we're going to capitalize on the fact that we're all sitting here at this table and we're going to sneak some Jesus in on you while you eat. So yeah. One of these days it'll be really cool if we could have like a full day program, but we'll see. Someday.
I think this might be a good time for a break, 5-minute break, so that everybody can get up and attend to their body's needs, whatever that looks like. Somebody snuck my cup of coffee into me, so maybe you need to get something like that. But can we come back at, I have 11:07. Let us come back at 11:15. That gives you just a smidge more than 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay? Great. This is not a comment worthy of the whole group, but I never had a time when I was able to buy a box of VBS because I always worked in congregations that had so little money to work with anyway that I was almost always creating things, out of whatever I had. But one of the things that one of my principles was that I have a horror for what I call paper plate crafts.
Oh, yeah.
I just absolutely,
Oh.
I just feel like kids are so shortchanged sometimes in the way we expect them to make do with cheap stuff. And so I would always advocate, I might do the VBS myself, or I would scrounge for the internet for something free that we could then adapt. But then I would advocate the biggest chunk of money always went to one quality craft for the week. There might be other less expensive crafts, but there would be at least one, and we could spend $300 to $500 on, maybe usually more like $3, on enough quality craft material so that they could go home with something really tangible that would last, would mean something to them in the future.
Yeah.
Something they could really be proud of and say, I did that. So that was, but that's just really because I just really detest those workbooks that say, 100 crafts with paper plates. I would just go,
One year for probably 3 or 4 months, we had people saving cardboard boxes, any kind of cereal boxes, any kind of cardboard box you can think of. And then every night for the craft, we would have a variety of different things you can do with these boxes, anything from construction paper to paint to glitter. God help me, I can't stand glitter. But we would have all kinds of different stuff. Glitter is not allowed in my home. And at the on sad day, on Thursday, we would use actually the majority of that night to take these things that we had built. Oh, and I neglected to say, we start on Sunday night and then move to Friday. Sunday, we have a really big party out in the church lawn. So that the posters and our neighborhood is not a place really that those are very effective. So the best thing to do is just be outside on the church lawn. We do have live music. We have food, and people just kind of wander out of their houses.
yes, to see what's going on. Yeah.
And we say, hey, tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, come back.
Yep.
So anyway, we start that night with these boxes, and by the time we get to Thursday, we have a pretty nice cache of boxes. And then we take the boxes and we start to build a sculpture, like the whole team, everyone there. We may divide them up into 2, depending on how many people we have, but we'll just put this sculpture together. And the whole point is to put the sculpture together so that you can, in some way, visibly see the different versions of the theme that the themes that we've gone through that week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So talk about being stingy. That's funny.
We used to start with a community meal too for at least a few years, and one good thing about the ongoing craft, or the craft that kids take almost the whole week to work on, it wouldn't be the only craft they did, but one craft might be something they worked on the whole week, was that if they got there early and ate and got done and were twiddling their thumbs and making their parents crazy because they wanted to get going, you could send them to the craft table and tell them to keep working on their craft, and it would give them something to do, and their parents could sit around and eat, and talk with one another and finish their meals in a relatively civilized. So that actually helped provide for something for kids to do while they were waiting for the real stuff to get started.
And another thing, was this a couple years ago? I think I bought this really, I think couldn't even been more than $30. This bubble machine. Oh my gosh. This bubble machine, it just went constantly. That's all that's all they wanted to do was to dance in the bubbles. And then we had those old school, you remember 2 people would stand on either side of this rope and you would pull the rope apart and the ball, like there's be a ball on it.
Yes. And you try to,
person, and then you
yeah.
you have to, oh my gosh, the all of us, the adults that were working, were doing it, our arms got so sore because we had bought, I think probably 3 of those things. And I mean, you would have thought we had some alien, because none of the kids had ever seen this. And so that was another thing. They just wanted to do the ball thing. I don't even want to ball. But after like one night, I actually put them away. It's like, we can't do this anymore.
Our arms are like rubber now.
I mean, that reminds me of at my first church, and carried this on to my second church, we only had crafts Monday through Thursday. And then Friday was for anybody to finish anything that they hadn't finished up to that point. And the other thing of that was Friday for us was always water day. So I would skip sad day, but we always had water day, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And that's like the end of the week thing.
Yeah.
And so I went to my second church and I'm making them the big pitch and like water day and yada, yada, yada. So again, just being really, again, stingy is a bad word, being very creative. I went down to Home Depot, bought some 1-inch PVC pipe, and I constructed these arches that I drilled a bunch of holes in, tied the hose into, and you turn it on and shot water.
Yeah.
I made 3 arches. They were all probably 5.5 feet tall, probably 6 feet wide. Cost me $7.
Oh my God. And that away. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then after VBS, we had these big arches, and somebody donated these raised flower beds, and we used the arches as the watering system for a community garden.
Oh.
Very cool.
Yeah, which you never know, right? Like,
yeah,
you never know one thing is going to, like, the ripple effect is.
Yes. Yeah.
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 All right, are we all here?
We are, I think.
All right, I have just a few short notes. Then I'm going to just kind of walk everybody through the packet, the VBS to go. I'm going to talk about that, and then, but I really want to open up the back end of our time together for more like brainstorming and questions. So just really briefly, and I mentioned this in the video, so I won't spend too much time on it, but when you're looking at volunteers, obviously the number of kids you have is going to impact that. I mean, like Sarah said, if your whole VBS moves as one family group, then that's going to be a really different structure. I've run VBSs with 80 kids, and I've run VBSs with 15 kids, and there's always a little bit of math that you have to do. But I assuming 60 kids, because I'm bad at math and I can do even numbers. If I have 60 kids, I have like 15 older kids and 15 younger kids. My VBS breadth is always 3-year-olds who are potty trained up to 5th grade. That's how I break it down. That's it. And like, again, there's no rules. It's just in my head. That's always worked the best. And so I tend to break those groups up into, 2 older kids, 2 younger kids. And then each group, you want to really have 2 group leaders, right? And that way, if somebody needs to go to the restroom, et cetera, you don't want one, especially one high school kid alone with like 15, 4th graders, because that's just sending them to the wolves,
Yeah.
You got your 5 area directors, and then each of your area directors should have like a key assistant. And again, part of that is if a kid needs to go to the restroom, right, that makes sure there's always 3 adults in every area, which is quintessential. One registrar on the front end of it who, A, you get involved early to help handle registration and that sort of thing, and B, be the consistent contact person with all the parents when kids are dropped off, and then get 2 or 3 floaters who are just good for running things in between the other areas. So, I mean, if you're talking 60, 70 kids, you're maybe looking at 20 volunteers. If everybody's moving in one group, then again, that changes that whole dynamic, because you're not running 4 groups and all those numbers change. But that's just, I always like give myself my starting point, and then if I need to adjust, it's always easier for me to have everything over planned and then be like, all right, let me mid-course correct and move forward that way. The other reality that we're all looking at here in January 2011 is, with social distancing and the COVID reality, what's Vacation Bible School going to look like? And I have enough friends who have kids that I've mined for information on how their kids are learning, that very much like school, we're kind of looking at either the synchronous model or the asynchronous model, you know. And if you do the synchronous model, you have that time together where you try to get whoever your Bible story leader is to get on Zoom or do whatever the case may be. And so-and-so is going to read the lesson and try to teach off of this at 11 to 11:45. And then so-and-so can show you in real time how to do the craft at home from 12 to 12:45. And the pros of that is it's a little more connected because the kids are going to see one another on Zoom or meetings or whatever it is. And there is something happening in real time. So it makes it feel like there's much more of an event. The downsides of the synchronous approach are, if you miss that day, you miss that day. But that's been true for VBS ever since. If you miss Monday, you missed Monday. You know what I mean? So that's a little bit of reality coming back around. The other thing is, if you're on a synchronous model, it forces families to adapt to your schedule. Bible time's at 11. If that doesn't work for that family for a host of reasons, and we can sit here and think of a million different reasons why that might or might not work. Again, that kind of forces a family's hand on one level. The other side of this is the asynchronous model, which, everything could be totally recorded. Everything could be released live or released on YouTube all at once, or it could just be an email that goes out every day that here is so-and-so reading the Bible story and giving you a lesson. Here's the craft director kind of showing you step by step. And it's always available because it's on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever the case may be. The pros on that is that's actually a lot less time for your volunteers in some way, because if you're the craft director and you do your 5 videos, you're kind of done there, And another pro of that is that's a lot more adaptable for the families who need that flexibility in their schedule. I mean, maybe Monday they do their VBS time at 9 a.m. Maybe Tuesday they do it at 3 p.m. Right? It's all on YouTube. There's no time signature. You're fine. The cons of that are there's little to no connection because everybody's doing it on their own. And in a world where parents have had so much extra pushed on their plates, here's one more thing that's, hey, now you get to lead your kid in VBS as well, right? So, I mean, there are pros and cons. Some of that, again, it's looking back to what are your parameters? What are your assets? Do you have the ability to do live stuff or only the ability to record? Are you working with other churches that may have those resources? Like, how big or how little do you want to engage with? I think that either way, the thing that's key is you look at the whole big VBS package and realize that, okay, either synchronous or asynchronous, putting together a children's singing choir time is probably not going to be the most effective thing due to the lag of Zoom and all the internet stuff. But what you can do is you can print out the gospel reading, a write-up of the lesson, put in that craft packet with detailed instructions. And if you really want to get clever, like a non-perishable food item that could be a snack, like goldfish or whatnot, maybe a CD of the tunes of whatever those songs are, just so that that's another, thing that they have as a home resource. An outline, all right, this is where on YouTube you go to find all the videos, or this is all the Zoom logins for all the different things. And then I would recommend throw in a copy of that lead sheet so that the parent or whoever's leading it can clearly, in one snapshot, here's our theme, here's all 5 days. Because, parents know how to teach and reach and react to their kids better than we do. So if they see that, I'm like, okay, this is our big arch, this is our big narrative, then the parent will be able to also incorporate things from the home as we're walking through these lessons together. And I would almost say, you put that together, you put together all 5 days, you put them in a packet, and then you're like, hey, drive by the church and pick it up, or, drop them off in people's mailboxes, whatever way works best in your context to kind of get those resources out to people. Again, I'm sure, like all of you, I really hope that by June, July, this is a lot more in the rearview mirror than it is now. But that being said, me being me, I'm gonna plan for the whole kit and caboodle. And then if I need to downshift a little bit, it's a lot easier to downshift than it is to say, oh no, we're going live. Now I have 2 weeks to get a music director. I'd much rather have all that lined up and all those resources kind of picked on the front end. So in the resources that were sent out, there is a packet there called VBS to go. And I put it together, what was it? I put it together in about a week, because I sat down and my theme was, my original idea for my theme was, how do I talk about the anxieties of the unending COVID reality without actually talking about COVID or pandemic or all that stuff? Because we're all hearing that way too much, right? Because it's real, but again, you can only hear it so much. So how can I find Bible stories or create a VBS that allows kids to see themselves in these stories of long, hard journeys or insurmountable things where God always shows up and helps us out in the back end, right? So it's helping them understand anxiety and fear and reminding them that God is always with us. Like, God will be there. God shows up for us in those moments. So if we look at the lead sheet for this fictitious 2021 Vacation Bible School titled "God Will Be There," these are my 5 Bible stories. Right, the Exodus. Right, it goes on forever. It's really, really long, but eventually they get to the Promised Land. Right, like I was talking to, I did a podcast with Bishop Dillahunt, and I think I made this comment to her. I always remind myself that no one who left Egypt actually ended up in the Promised Land. So we are at least better than the Exodus generation. We will get through the end of this, right? Like, we will see the other side. And so again, like this idea, God leads us through the desert and God provides for them in the desert, right? So you do like the quail manna kind of deal. That's cool. Tuesday, Jesus is tempted in the desert by Mark. It's a hard time. It's a struggle, but hard times don't last, and that faith is the key. Wednesday, Jonah and the whale, because it involves one of my favorite Old Testament verses in it. But this idea that Jonah was isolated and scared, but God came through. I don't know about you guys, but since March 15th, there's been a lot of days I've felt isolated and scared, and again, like, it speaks to the situation in this way that we find comfort, because everything works out for Jonah, even though he's a little bit of a jerk at the end of that. He is. Thursday, doing the feeding of the 5,000. That whole idea, the people were unsure, the disciples were unsure. We have all these people. Is there enough? Will they be able to eat? And again, I got this idea, all this talk about resources, especially with economic ups and downs. And now in the news, it's every other day, it's, are there enough vaccines? Are there not? And again, I'm not going to turn the VBS into a vaccine conversation with kids, but the idea that God provides amid the fear of scarcity, that's a powerful gospel statement. And then the 5th day, Friday, I really like that road to Emmaus, right? Eventually the journey ends and Jesus is there with us. And surprise, Jesus was actually there with us the whole time, right? So this was kind of my idea, was to have all these stories that talked about the fears and anxieties of the modern world, but to anchor that and cradle that and undergird that with these biblical stories to let kids kind of work through those emotions in a different way. In the pages that follow, so what I did was I picked those 5 stories, and my lead sheet literally just had the Bible lessons filled in. And then I emailed this out to friends of mine who I had worked with at VBSs before. I was like, hey, what can you do with this? And then everything else that's in this packet were ideas that, with the exception of, I kind of helped put together the music stuff, but my friend Christine, who was my craft director at my first church, In the packet, you find all of her suggestions for different crafts. And again, she really put a lot of time and thought into, okay, well, the Exodus is a long story, creating this marble maze. It's a maze God leads us through, right? Jesus is tempted in the desert. This idea that faith is the key and this key wind chime. But again, think about Jesus is standing on top of on top of the mountain and overlooking the city, and you can tell that story in a vivid way that the wind is blowing, and as the wind is blowing, there's faith. The Jonah and the well, look at her notes. I mean, they're really cool. She has this whole thing about like making a big well and then making a little popsicle stick Jonah, which is just hilarious and clever. To do the feeding of the 5,000, looking back at that old first century, like that ichthus design, that fish idea, and the fact that we are fed by the fish, or we are fed by fish in the story, fishes and loaves, but also with that ichthus history, like we are fed by the fish, like capital T. We have the Ohio State University and the fish who feeds us, right? Because you always have to make a Buckeye tie-in when you're in Ohio. I'm pretty sure that's a law here. And then Christine put her picture frame on Friday because I asked her for 5 days, and in her note she goes, we only do 4 days of crafts because Friday is catch-up day. But she was like, all right, I put the picture frame on Friday. And again, what a really great idea. Jesus meets us there. And then you think about a picture of a kid in a frame that says Jesus meets us. Like, again, super clever idea. The music selections here, the 3 of them that say attached, my office administrator is a recent graduate from Capital University with a degree in composition. So I was talking to him and I was like, yeah, I'm doing this VBS thing. And Nate goes, can I write songs for you for VBS? And I was like, if you really want to, man, you knock yourself out. And so his original scores are included in the packet of resources for today's event. And he wrote, like, again, he's a college graduate who does composition. I just happen to fall on that as a lucky coincidence. Not everybody has that resource. So, what a friend we have in Jesus when Jesus is tempted, that's straight out of the ELW. And, you can do that. I remember singing that a cappella at Lutheran camps when I was, 4th grade. Or then I found Who Did Swallow Jonah? I found that on YouTube. It was easy. It was quick. It was a quick memorizing song. It was a high energy song. And so I just wanted to show 3 different places where you can pull these kind of music ideas out of. If you don't have anything other than an internet connection, I mean, YouTube has stuff there. If you grew up doing summer camps as a camp kid like I did, then, and I also grew up in the South, right? So what a friend we have in Jesus, you have memorized by the time you're 3, like that's what you do in the South, or, there are other people who can bring those musical gifts who are more creative than I am in that place. Looking at games, I just kind of started scribbling down ideas very loosely based on the theme, right? Because a lot of times with games, you want it to be in the ballpark of the theme, but you also just want to tire the kids out so they're easily more manageable for the back end of the day. I mean, that's just kind of the truth to it, right? And then my friend Cindy put together all of our snack choices. And again, she just did amazing things with, I like to call this flavor text, right? It's like things that are added that really add to the overall flavor and the overall experience to give that more holistic approach. So, the Israelites are in the desert and she figured out how to make pudding cups that look like sand in the desert. We have palm tree cookies for Jesus when he's in the desert. Whale cookies. My favorite was the bag of fish on the Jonah day to be a mixture of Swedish fish and oyster crackers and goldfish. And it's a trail mix made out of nothing but fish, which is just really clever. And again, I would not have thought of that in a million years. But again, this is just a real-time example of I sent everybody a lead sheet with a theme and 5 Bible stories. And within a week, this is a week's worth of work. And of that week's worth of work, I did 30 minutes. Like I had the idea, I picked the Bible stories, I stuck them together and kind of went out the other side and really kind of trusted on my volunteers to help put this together. So if we end up doing, and we may very well use this VBS this summer, if we do this and we have to do an online version of it, and we have to either do the synchronous or the asynchronous version, then what we're going to do is we'll pull out the Bible stories, the gospel readings, like a write-up that kind of helps teach that lesson. We'll do the crafts, and we'll try to provide a little. If we're online, what I'll probably do is I'll look for more YouTube songs, just so that if parents want to include a music portion, I mean, the idea is not that their kid is going to learn how to sing a song by themselves or whatever the case may be. But there are a lot of really cool VBSs that have their whole like box curriculums who have all their songs online that you can find, there is a Jonah song that's about 4 minutes long, and it tells the whole story of Jonah in a musical form. So to give parents those kind of resources that like, all right, well, after you read the story and kind of have this little lesson, you can, play the Jonah song. Again, our job is to teach the stories, to reinforce the stories, and to make sure that the stories are learned before you transition to your craft or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns? I don't know, like, what are you all's thoughts on this?
Been thinking about dance parties as kind of a combo of the musical piece and the game piece. So if you had the right kind of music, you just kind of put that, if you were doing a synchronous thing, you might just put that video up for everybody to watch, but say dance party, and let the kids work out some wiggles that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Huh. Yeah. So we got about 15, 20 minutes left. So I just want to kind of open this up to, again, people who have specific questions, or maybe in the last hour and 40 minutes, you're like, hey, I kind of have this idea. Like, how would you create a VBS around, like, kick out a theme and we can brainstorm a little bit and say, all right, that's a really cool theme idea. This is how we could put this together.
I was thinking with games and using your lead sheet. One of the classrooms I observed out at Lakewood, every day the fourth grade teacher, the room I was helping with, would incorporate an exercise time. So the game could be, you could do this on the Zoom, have one person leading, invent a game or an exercise that goes with these themes. And so even though the children are at home, and even though you can't be all together, and even though you're not going to do it with everybody talking, the leader can be doing that, and maybe using some of the upbeat songs and do the exercise like Katie was saying with the dance party, but maybe call it an exercise time.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. All right, let's use that as a kernel of an idea here, right? Like let's say we want to start our VBS with that idea, this idea of like exercise, right? Our theme could be biblical boot camp, right? It could be, right? So we can think about things that would be athletic or cardio kind of things, right? So we have hiking through the desert, we have walking on water, we have what else do we have? We have a bunch of church folks on a Zoom call. We ought to be able to think of 3 more.
Mountain climbing.
Mountain climbing is a great one, because that's like transfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
Mary and Joseph walking to Jerusalem.
Walking, walking would be to Jerusalem, yeah. Oh, or if you want to get creative, right? Slaughter of the innocents when they're running.
I guess.
Oh, I'd have so many people mad at me.
Yeah, so we got walking, we have swimming, we have hiking, we have possibly running.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if anybody floated.
Well, what about Samson? What about deeds of strength?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's not forget our Old Testament friends, you know. So right there, so if you have feats of strength, because you have Samson, we have 5 stories right there.
Yeah.
Like that is 5, right? So there's our Genesis, or there's the Genesis of our event, right? So we call it like biblical boot camp, and we just kind of nuance these 5 stories to underline. Oh, or what about all the Paul stuff about the competition of life and wrestling the devil and we are competitors and we run the race and all this sort of thing, right?
Yeah, run the race is a good one.
Yeah. So we or Jacob wrestling with God before Jacob's ladder.
Oh, yeah, I thought that's what you were referring to earlier. Sorry.
No, yeah. I think I got there before I got there. Yeah. Or as a mentor of mine, my Hebrew professor always liked to point out, if you read Jacob's ladder in Hebrew, there is a Hebrew word for ladder, and that is not the word used in that story. It's actually a pole.
Really?
Because if it was a ladder, Jacob could have walked up the ladder and looked into heaven. He goes, it is a pole that the angels are kind of like doing the fireman thing and sliding up and down. And he goes, we call it Jacob's ladder because no pastor wants to preach on Jacob and the pole dancing angels. Like that's just going to be a weird thing. But that being said,
that's good.
Gymnastics.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a pole, right? Like, and all that sort of thing. So we take any of the 10 stories we have now, and we make sure that as we teach them, we're teaching them with that whole, almost that Pauline idea of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we show these amazing feats of strength, whether it's wrestling with God or the angel with Jacob, whether it's Samson, whether it's Mary and Joseph, walking to avoid the slaughter of the innocents, whether it's Peter, James, and John and Jesus walking up for transfiguration, that sort of things, so our teaching motto is, look how big this thing is, but we can do it with Christ who strengthens us. You know what I mean?
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And a great and you could do your picture frame on Transfiguration Day, and then your frame can be like Peter, James, and John, and you, or you know what I mean, or like Jesus, Moses, Elijah, and all on the frame, and the kids decorate around that, and then you're on the mountain with them. Yeah. See, I almost like this better than the one I wrote. I could really get into this.
So this entire time, my daughter and I have what we're calling Coveted Blessings. Good things that never would have happened if we hadn't all, had our lives come to a screeching halt and, everything changing the way the things you do, the way you go about doing them. So we call them Coveted Blessings. And essentially the underlying theme is that God always has a way of taking something bad and flipping it on its head and having the ultimate victory over it. And so, we've been kind of ruminating on, like you said, the Bible stories or particular scriptures that talk about God coming in, turning something on its head and making something good out of it. But I kind of feeling like I'm going to steal what we've been talking about instead.
Yeah, I know, I like that idea too. All right, so let's traverse our minds for events that start negative but then turn out positive. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah, that comes from the story of Joseph. I mean, that's the first story that comes to me, who talks to his brothers about the, the way in which they mistreated him and dropped him into a whole nother reality. And he tells them at the end, God worked this for good. He took what you did and works all things for good. And that'd be like a great first story. And then, there's got to be some other stories, or Bible verses, or where that same spirit is evoked. This confidence that God works things for life.
Yeah.
I think about the book of Ruth, right? Like Ruth started, like her husband and then Milon and Shilon are two kids, and her husband's name is about to die, and her two kids' names translate to sickly and kaput.
Yeah.
And the first verse, they all die.
Yeah.
And then look at like the great example of her life, right? So Joseph is a great one. I think Ruth is in that ballpark.
And to the extent that these stories are all about people whose lives have been completely turned on their heads, and they never imagined it would look like this. Those stories carry an extra nuance to them. I mean, we might not be able to find that many stories where that is true, but that is how we feel, right? Like our lives have been completely turned upside down.
Yeah.
Or getting us from think about just getting us from like Noah to Abraham, right? Like you start with Noah and like, oh no, like the gig is up.
Yep.
And then, if it wasn't for Noah, we wouldn't get to Abraham. Or I don't know, when you first started talking, I was even thinking about, like the Saul Paul conversion story.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's a good one. Yeah.
I think too, Katie, you mentioned, like, I don't know if we could come up with enough stories for the one theme. I think that's also something we might have to look at. I mean, traditionally we all do Vacation Bible School for 5 days or 5 evenings.
Yes.
Is that feasible if we have to make 2 plans, or 3 plans, or offer it multiple times for group size, or, that sort of thing. So even in that tradition of 5 days, maybe it's only 3 days this time.
Right. I think, I think we have to assume all of our assumptions are on the table for reconsideration. Right. If you were having to do online, maybe 3 days is all you can really expect families to do. Right.
And,
I mean, maybe
that's kind of where I'm going is, even if I have to use the box curriculum from last year that didn't get used. Take the best of it, right? Just well, and in any VBS in a box, it always seems like there are 3 good ones, right? And then 2 that just kind of got tacked on because they were married to that theme. Exactly. And for budget purposes too, and maybe you can do a little more if you have to deliver boxes or have your families pick up supply bags or whatever. Do a little more.
Make them 3 good days.
3 days, right?
3 awesome days, instead of stretching over 5. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. Even by June, even if you were able to do in-person VBS, there may still be good reasons why you don't want to bring a lot of people together for 5 days, right? I mean, in a sense, we may still be thinking about viral load at that point, and 3 days every other day or something may seem like a more realistic plan to kind of manage viral load a little bit.
And I'm even thinking, dividing it up. I think traditionally here it's been a morning thing, and so shorten that. It's not 3 hours. We don't need to be together for 3 hours, even if we can do it all outside for 3 days, whatever. But really kind of tightening it up and just doing the very best we can do. And then maybe, like somebody mentioned, they do is a neighborhood family style in the evening. I come from years of evening VBS. So even looking at that, you know, a couple of nights for those families who can't come in the morning and do it family style, and there, you know, maybe we can incorporate staff, especially here, that traditionally can't help in the daytime, but could help in the evening, and just use the opportunity we've been given to kind of rethink how we do it and and then still what is safe to do.
Yeah. One year I was dealing with a congregation that had not done VBS for a long time. And one of the complaints was that families were just too busy and they couldn't give up a whole week at one time, which is odd because in a lot of other places, a family will say, yeah, we can do 1 week, we just can't do whatever. But so we decided to spread our VB, to do 2 things. We wanted to make it intergenerational, but we knew we couldn't get entire families every night for a week. So we spread it out over the whole summer. So we made it like the first Thursday of every summer month. And we ended up only having 3 or 4 sessions, but it was all of the volunteers found that they could actually, that we got a lot more participation from volunteers because they could commit to 1 day a month. And also it spread out the planning a little bit.
Right.
It allowed us to spread that out. So I'm not sure if it was like a huge success, but it's an example of the way in which we were able to sort of reconsider what the requirements parameters are that we're dealing with, and not feel that we had to stick to a particular format. We lost Betty. But it is 11:54, so.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, we're having such a good time.
Yeah. I was, when you were, Pastor Hille, when you mentioned about the drilling holes in the PVC and making a water thing, I think that is so cool. If you were going to do let's say an evening event, and you were to invite the whole family to come, that kind of thing could be done as a family too. Right now, we don't, I had planned to maybe offer, although that's not my responsibility with council, I'm outreach. But one of the ideas I had at Christmas time was to have a family come, 1 family at a time, just because of what we were going through. And we could have been back in October when it was super nice. We could have done this outside on the picnic table, have the materials for mom, dad, and the kids to build a manger.
Oh.
Just a manger. And then ask them to take the manger home and think of good things they could put in there, like food, then that could be given to a family that needed food. But that could be, you could change the idea on that too. Maybe another night, do what you said with the PVC. That wouldn't cost very much at all to provide those opportunities, the materials, I mean, for a family. And they could take that home to use, to play at home. Everybody likes to do that in the summer. And maybe encourage, maybe give them some seed packets to go with it, and they could plant some seeds. That one would tie in here with this theme. I don't know where the manger would, but I'm just trying to think of activities that a family could do.
One year I did as part of a Lenten, I wanted to attract families to a Lenten series. And I knew I needed to provide an activity for their kids at the same time, or the adults wouldn't be able to pay attention to what was going on. It was going to be an adult level Bible study. And so I had volunteers agree to take the children, and I provided all the materials. And what they did was work over 5 weeks on resurrection dish gardens, where they created in a dish, in a small pot dish, what they thought the Garden of Gethsemane looked like, or where actually the garden where Jesus was buried, that the cemetery. And so they started with, decorating the pot. And so over 6 weeks they did that, but you could easily condense that into, 1 day, depending. I was sort of adding on activities to keep them busy for 5 or 6 weeks, but really in 2 hours, kids could easily fill a pot with dirt and then arrange stones to create a tomb. And we provided moss and small plants and a pet. Sometimes they wanted to stick crosses in, and it was really quite a fun activity. It was part of my ongoing effort to provide quality crafts opportunities for kids that weren't just paper plates. So it turned out really, really awesome. It was a lot of fun, but sometimes when you include the families, what you can do is reduce your number of volunteers that you need, because you don't have to have volunteers whose sole job is to monitor children. Their parents are there to do that, right? But you could easily have families work together on something like a resurrection garden. So yeah, there are all kinds of, I could see the PVC thing being part of something that has to do with a baptismal theme, because then they get all wet and then they get to go home and be all wet there and be reminded. So yeah, this is one of the things I really enjoy about talking about this kind of stuff. Because I don't think of myself as a very creative person, but I really love hanging out with creative people. What I am is a creative borrower. I like to borrow ideas and then adapt them, and that's sort of what I do. But I really, really, really love working with kids and families. So this topic really excites me. So does anybody have any last questions to ask? Or comments to make?
Thank you, Pastor Dan.
Thank you so very, very much.
Yes.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it is 12 o'clock. Thank you so very much for spending part of your Saturday morning with us. We're so glad to have had you. We will be sending out this video to you all so that you have it. And then all of these materials will also be made available to the general public. Anybody who wants to come to our website to find it. So even though we didn't have as many people today in this early January season when people aren't ready to think about this, as they think about it later, as their questions come to them, as they start saying, oh, what am I going to do about VBS, this will be available. So thank you for your contributions. Your contributions have all been so valuable. And thank you, Pastor Dan, so much.
Yes, thank you.
You all have a wonderful day. Please stay safe and well. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Go in peace and serve the Lord.
Right. Thanks be to God.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.